The story begins with Chris, a former U.S. Army Special Forces soldier, returning home to Washington, D.C. after 10 long years of service. On his way back, he drives past an abandoned factory, once the pride of the town, now just a silent ruin. The sight hits him hard. That factory used to give people honest work, including his own father. As he stops to read a closure notice posted on the gate, the town sheriff pulls up and greets him. Recognizing Chris from the old days, the sheriff offers him a ride home. At first, Chris refuses, but after a bit of teasing, he hops into the patrol car. As the car drives away, he's coming home to stand tall again. This is walking tall.
This is my town. Walking tall.
Back home, Chris is reunited with his sister, now working as a paramedic, and soon after, his parents arrive to welcome him. Over dinner, he tells them he's home for good and plans to find work at the old factory. That's when he learns that his family never told him the factory had shut down years ago after his father was laid off. They didn't want to burden him while he was away serving his country. Later that night, Chris tries to reconnect with his nephew Pete, but the kid has an attitude and storms off before finishing dinner. The next day, while fixing the front porch, Chris gets a visit from an old high school friend, Ray. The two catch up. Ray's been through some rough times and proudly mentions he's been sober for over a year. When he invites Chris to a friendly football game with their old buddies, Chris agrees. At the game, they're joined by Jay Hamilton, a wealthy local whose family once owned the lumber mill that powered the town's economy. These days, Jay runs the casino that replaced it. His team plays rough, but no one dares to challenge him.
Best you got? What? Here, take a walk.
Chris notices Pete hanging around the sidelines with some sketchy teenagers, smoking and joking. The match heats up until one of Jay's men, Booth, lands a dirty tackle on Chris, injuring his knee. Still, Chris keeps his cool, refusing to fight back. Afterward, Jay invites the group to his casino that night. When Chris spots Pete wandering nearby with his friends, he warns him to stay away from trouble, but Pete just smirks and walks off. That evening, Chris and Ray head to the casino, dazzled by the lights and luxury. Waitresses glide between tables, dancers entertain the guests, and the air hums with loud music and laughter. Jay himself welcomes them and orders his staff to treat them like VIPs. While taking a break in a private booth, Chris catches sight of one of the dancers. She's Denny, someone from his past. But instead of saying hello, she turns and walks away. Confused and uneasy, Chris returns to the gaming floor to join Ray. There, he notices a man cheating with loaded dice. Chris steps in to stop him, but the confrontation quickly escalates. Security rushes in, and before long, Chris is overpowered and dragged into the basement. Chris wakes up in a dim room, tied down and surrounded by three men. Booth, one of Jay's enforcers, rips the dog tags from around Chris's neck and coldly pulls out a folding knife. What happens next is brutal. Chris is left bleeding and broken on a bridge, his body barely clinging to life. Hours later, a passing truck driver spots him and rushes him to the hospital. The doctors are stunned that he's even alive. They tell his family that whoever did this meant to kill him, and that most men wouldn't have survived such an attack. After days in the hospital, Chris is finally brought home to recover. His family stays close, taking care of him around the clock. Pete, his nephew, even cooks for him and keeps him company. Slowly, Chris regains his strength. We see him training again, pushing his limits, determined to get back on his feet. One afternoon, Jay Hamilton himself shows up at Chris's house. With a smug grin, he offers an apology on behalf of his men and tries to buy forgiveness with a job offer, be the head of security at his casino. Chris turns it down without hesitation. Jay presses harder, even pulls out an envelope full of cash, calling it a peace offering. But Chris isn't interested. He tells Jay straight that he plans to file an official report about the attack. Later, Chris walks into the sheriff's office to report the assault. Sheriff Watkins listens but gives him a familiar small-town excuse. He says there isn't enough evidence, and that since the factory shut down, the casino is the only thing keeping the local economy alive. Shutting it down would destroy what's left of the town. Then, without shame, he tells Chris to drop it and get out. Defeated but not broken, Chris leaves the station, warning the sheriff that he'll expose the truth no matter what. The next day, Denny visits him. The two share quiet moments together, talking about the state of their hometown and how far it's fallen. Half joking, she tells him he should run for sheriff. Chris smiles and says maybe he will. When Chris returns home, His mother says Pete has been hospitalized after a drug overdose. Without wasting a second, they rush to the scene. Michelle, the paramedic, explains that Pete is stable now, but he came dangerously close to death. She also reveals what substances he took that caused the overdose. Soon after, Pete's friends come clean. They admit that they were the ones who pressured him into using the drugs. Furious, Chris demands to know where the drugs came from. One of the kids, trembling but defiant, blurts out that they got them from a casino security guard. Hearing that, something inside Chris snaps. Ignoring his parents' pleas, he storms home, grabs his gun, and drives straight to the casino. But just as he's about to walk in, he stops. Instead of taking the gun, he leaves it in the truck. He grabs a wooden stick and marches inside. Without a word, Chris starts smashing every slot machine in sight. The sound of breaking glass and collapsing metal fills the room. Guards rush in to stop him, but he fights back fiercely, using the stick in his bare hands. One by one, he takes them all down. When the chaos settles, Chris hurls his stick through Jay Hamilton's office window, shattering the glass. Then he calmly steps outside, waiting for the police to arrive. Moments later, he's arrested for assault and property damage. Days later, he faces trial. Jay shows up with casino employees who claim Chris attacked them without reason. The prosecution paints him as a violent ex-soldier who lost control. Sitting beside his lawyer, Chris realizes something's wrong. The man meant to defend him won't even speak. It becomes clear he's been bought off. Right there in court, Chris fires his lawyer and insists on defending himself. The judge warns him against it, but Chris doesn't back down. Standing before the jury, he speaks from the heart. He reminds everyone of the town they used to be. A town that would never have allowed a place like Jay's Casino to exist. He calls out the corruption, the drugs, and the people profiting from misery. The courtroom tries to silence him, but Chris refuses. He declares his plan to run for sheriff and promises to clean up the town. Then, in a powerful moment, he rolls up his sleeve and shows the scars from when Jay's men nearly killed him.
That this never happens to anyone else again.
The room falls silent. Everyone can see the truth written on his body. When the verdict comes, the jury finds Chris not guilty. The courtroom erupts in cheers, and word spreads fast through town. People pour into the streets, shouting his name and calling for him to run for sheriff. After winning the election, Chris is officially sworn in as the new sheriff. On his first morning, he climbs into his new pickup truck and drives straight to the police station, ready to take control. Inside, Sheriff Watkins greets him, assuring that every deputy there is loyal and trustworthy. But Chris already knows how deep the corruption runs. He walks into the office, looks around at the men who once served under Watkins, and tells them all they're fired. Just like that, the department is cleaned out. Days later, Jay Hamilton is seen cruising around town in his Porsche with his girlfriend, feeling untouchable as ever. Chris pulls him over and delivers a quiet, sharp warning. Jay mocks him, tries to buy him off with money and charm, but Chris doesn't flinch. As he walks away, he smashes the Porsche's taillight with his baton and tells Jay to fix it himself.
They're broken.
Determined to rebuild his team, Chris visits his old friend Ray, asking him to become his deputy. At first, Ray refuses because he's been fighting his old battle with alcohol and doesn't think he's the right man for the job. But Chris tells him that's exactly why he needs him, because Ray knows what it means to fight back and stand for something again. Eventually, Ray agrees. Together, they start dismantling Jay's criminal empire, piece by piece, rounding up his men one after another. Their first mission is to shut down the town's drug trade. Ray helps Chris identify the main dealer, and it turns out to be Booth. During a search, Ray finds a packet of drugs hidden in Booth's sock. When Booth refuses to talk, they tear apart his car at the repair shop, searching every inch for more evidence. But they come up empty-handed. Furious over the damage, Booth threatens revenge, warning that his friends will come for them. Chris stays calm, unfazed by the threats, and orders Booth to be locked up until he's ready to talk. Still, Chris can't shake the worry about his family's safety, so he sends Ray to his house to keep watch while he stays overnight at the station. Later that night, Denny shows up, bringing food for him. For a moment, there's calm before the storm. The next morning, everything explodes. Chris steps outside and finds his patrol car engulfed in flames. Seconds later, gunfire rains down on the building. Jay's men, along with Booth's crew, are launching a full-scale assault on the sheriff's office. Bullets tear through the walls. They don't care who gets caught in the crossfire, not even Booth, who's still locked inside a cell. With no time to waste, Chris breaks through the barricade to get Denny to safety. He then rushes to Booth's cell, where the terrified dealer begs for release, finally admitting that the drugs came from Jay himself. Jay's been running his operation out of that same old lumber factory, which is now turned into a secret drug lab. But before Booth can say anything more, a shot rings out. One of Jay's men kills him on the spot. Chris dives for cover, grabs his weapon, and goes on the offensive. Fueled by anger and duty, he takes down Jay's men one by one, turning the burning police station into a war zone. At the same time, over at Chris's house, Ray is standing guard when Jay's men launch a surprise attack. Gunfire breaks out, and Ray gets hit, the bullet grazing him badly. But even wounded, he refuses to go down. Fueled by adrenaline, he fights back hard, stabbing one of the attackers. When another man rushes in to help, Ray takes him down too. Moments later, Chris bursts onto the scene, and in the chaos, Ray, still in fight mode, accidentally swings at him too. Once things settle, Chris checks to make sure his family is safe, then turns his focus to the source of all this violence. Inside the property, Jay is waiting for him. The two finally come face to face. But before Chris can act, Jay triggers a trap, sending Chris stumbling dangerously close to the edge. In a split-second move, Chris grabs Jay and pulls him down with him. They both fall hard, crashing through debris, and Chris twists his leg on impact. Jay recovers first and charges after him, chasing him into the woods. Both men are battered and exhausted, but neither gives up. Jay swings a heavy axe, while Chris fights back with nothing but a chunk of wood he picks up from the ground. Despite the odds, Chris overpowers Jay in a brutal, desperate fight. When it's over, Jay lies defeated, and Chris, limping but standing tall, says the fight is done.
This is my town.
Jay will finally face justice. In the aftermath, Chris and Ray take over Jay's old casino, turning it from a den of crime into something good. They also reopen the old lumber mill, the very heart of the town that once gave people honest work. So the moral of the story is, if your town's economy depends on a shady casino, maybe it's time to stop gambling and start punching slot machines like Chris.